Can ancient wisdom make you a better person? It feels like we're all running on a treadmill that's perpetually speeding up. Our phones buzz with endless notifications, our calendars are a relentless grid of obligations, and our minds are constantly churning with a low-grade hum of anxiety. We're trying to find peace in a world that never stops talking. I know I was. But what if the answer wasn't in a new productivity app or a self-help bestseller? What if the key was hidden 2,000 years in the past, in the writings of men who faced plagues, exile, and the chaos of the Roman Empire? I decided to find out. I spent a full week living by the core rules of the Stoics. No shortcuts, no excuses. I wanted to see if their ancient operating system for the mind could handle the pressures of our modern world. Here's what happened. Part 1. The rules of the game. First, let's clear something up. When we hear the word Stoic, we usually picture someone who is emotionless, a human statue that represses everything. But that's not what Stoicism is about at all. It's a practical philosophy for life, championed by some of history's most interesting figures. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who ruled at the height of its power, Seneca, a famous playwright and one of the wealthiest men in Rome, and Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and became one of antiquity's most respected teachers. What united them was the belief that the goal of life is inner peace, or tranquility, which you achieve by living a life of virtue and focusing only on what you can control. It's not about having no emotions, it's about not being a slave to them. To truly put this to the test, I couldn't just dip my toe in. I created a strict regimen of 7 core Stoic practices to follow every day for a week. These were my rules of the game. Rule 1. Waking early. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius famously wrote in his journal about arguing with himself to get out of bed, reminding himself he wasn't born to huddle under the blankets, but to do the work of a human being. So my alarm was set for 5:30 a.m. every single day, to start with purpose before the world could impose its own agenda on me. Rule 2. Control your thoughts, not the world. This is the heart of Stoicism, what they call the dichotomy of control. It's the simple but life-altering idea that some things are up to us and others are not. Most of our anger, fear, and frustration comes from trying to control things we can't, like traffic, the weather, or what other people think. This week, my entire focus would be on what was within my power, my choices, my reactions, and my own thoughts. Everything else I had to practice letting go of. Rule 3. The journal as a weapon. The Stoics were obsessive self-examiners, so every morning I would use a journal to prepare for the day ahead, thinking about what challenges I might face and how I would respond with virtue. Every evening, I would review the day, not to judge myself, but to see where I lived up to my principles and where I could do better. The journal was to be my training ground. Rule 4. Memento Mori. Remember you will die. This sounds incredibly dark, but the Stoics saw it as a tool for vibrant living. By taking a few moments each day to contemplate my own mortality, I wasn't trying to be morbid. The goal was to create a sense of urgency and perspective. When you remember that your time is finite, the small petty annoyances of the day tend to shrink to their proper size. Rule 5. Negative visualization. This practice feels completely backward. I would intentionally spend a few minutes each day imagining losing the things I hold most dear, my job, my home, even my relationships. This isn't an exercise in anxiety. It's a powerful antidote to taking things for granted. By imagining life without them, the goal is to cultivate a deep and powerful gratitude for having them right now. Rule 6. Voluntary discomfort. To build mental fortitude, you need to train it like a muscle. So this week, I had to intentionally introduce small, voluntary hardships into my life. Things like taking a brutally cold shower, walking instead of driving when I was in a hurry, or skipping a meal. The idea is to teach yourself that you can withstand discomfort, so that when life throws real involuntary hardship your way, you're not so easily broken. And Rule 7, read the greats. And finally, I had to go to the source. Every day, I committed to spending at least 15 minutes reading the actual words of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or Epictetus, to learn directly from the masters who laid it all out 2 millennia ago. 7 days, 7 rules. It felt ambitious, and I was deeply skeptical, but I was committed. Part 2. The 7-Day Diary. Day 1. The first alarm at 5:30 a.m. was pure pain. My warm bed felt like a paradise I was foolishly abandoning. My first thought was, Marcus Aurelius had an empire to run. I have an inbox full of emails. But I dragged myself into the kitchen, made a coffee in the dark, and sat down with my journal. It was awkward. Staring at the blank page, I felt like I was back in middle school. My first entry was clumsy. Okay, I'm awake. Goal for today, be less annoyed in traffic. Obstacle? Traffic. It felt silly, but I did it. The first day was a lesson in just showing up. Day 2. The universe must have been listening because it decided to test me immediately. I opened my laptop to an email about a project I was managing. It was from a colleague, and the tone was dripping with passive aggression, subtly blaming me for a deadline that was now at risk. I felt that hot, familiar surge of adrenaline. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type a defensive, equally passive-aggressive reply. And then I stopped. Rule number 2, the dichotomy of control. I asked myself out loud, what is actually in my power right now? I couldn't control their tone. I couldn't undo the delay. The only thing I could control was my response. I took a deep breath, deleted my angry draft, and wrote a simple, professional email focused entirely on the solution. The external problem didn't vanish, but my internal anger did. It was a strange, powerful feeling of peace. Day 3. Today's main event was negative visualization. I sat quietly and walked myself through the exercise of imagining that I had lost my job. I pictured the empty calendar, the financial worry, the sense of lost identity. It was genuinely unsettling. But after 5 minutes, when I let the thoughts go and returned to the present, I looked at my to-do list for the day with a completely new feeling: gratitude. The annoying tasks suddenly seemed like opportunities. The challenging project seemed like a gift. It didn't make me anxious about the future. It made me deeply appreciative of the present. Day 4. The day of voluntary discomfort. I chose the Stoic classic, the cold shower. I stood in front of the shower for a full minute, mentally preparing for battle. I turned the knob all the way to cold and stepped in. It was a pure electric shock. Every instinct screamed to get out. But I stayed. I forced myself to breathe slowly and evenly. And after about 30 seconds, something shifted. The panic subsided, replaced by a strange sense of calm, focused endurance. When I stepped out, my skin was tingling, and my mind felt sharp and incredibly clear. I felt like I had won a victory over the weaker part of myself, and I carried that feeling of quiet confidence with me for the rest of the day. Day 5. Memento Mori. I found a quiet moment in the afternoon to just sit and think about the finite nature of my life. It sounds heavy, but the effect was the opposite. I thought about all the things I was stressing over this week: a small work mistake, a boring errand I had to run, an argument I'd replayed in my head. In the face of my own mortality, they all felt so ridiculously small. It was like wiping a dirty window clean and suddenly seeing what was important. It didn't make me sad, it made me focused. I stopped what I was doing and called my parents just to hear their voices. Day 6. My daily reading was becoming a highlight. Today, I was reading Epictetus, the former slave, and a particular passage jumped out at me. He said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." It was the lesson of the angry email on day 2, the lesson of the cold shower on day 4, all perfectly summarized in one sentence from 2,000 years ago. It felt less like reading ancient philosophy and more like getting timely, practical advice from a very wise mentor. Day 7. The 5:30 a.m. alarm went off, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a punishment. It just felt like the start of the day. I sat down with my journal, and this time the words flowed easily. It felt less like a chore and more like a strategy session with myself. Looking back over the week, I realized I hadn't magically solved all my problems. The world was still just as chaotic and unpredictable as it was 7 days ago, but my reaction to it had fundamentally changed. I hadn't become emotionless, but I had found a space between an event and my reaction to it, and in that space, I found freedom. So that was my week living as a modern-day Stoic. It was one of the most challenging and rewarding weeks I've had in a long time. And now, I'm curious about you. Of these 7 rules, which one resonates most with you? Which one would you be willing to try, even for just a day? Maybe it's the early morning, the daily journal, or maybe you're brave enough for the cold shower. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching.